All right, we'll move on. Many businesses cite the lack of skilled talent as a major problem in attracting and retaining human capital in their business. Vote Prosperity proposes that the federal government work more closely with business in retraining skills development and expanding work integration learning. What would your party do if you form a government to address this significant skills gap and learning issue for Canada's economy? And we'll go to candidate Hill first.
One of the first things we do is we provide a greater investment in terms of post-secondary education by providing free tuition at the post-secondary level and the trade colleges level as well. It's really important that we develop the sort of workforce that Canada needs in the 21st century and not depend on the sort of 20th century economy that the country has been used to in things like natural resources extraction and heavy manufacturing as such. The financial burden for students, for example, is now at historic levels, and we need to be able to fix that. So the Green Party government will make college and education, university education free for all Canadian students. We'll forgive the portion of existing debt held by the federal government, remove the 2% gap on increases in funding for Indigenous students, and ensure that all Indigenous youth have access to post-secondary education. They can go on about this and talk as well about the effect of artificial intelligence, AI, and automation on our workforce as well. These are additional topics we should address in this debate.
I'm not sure if I heard an answer to the question. How would you address the skills gap issue that we have in Canada with businesses? Is it simply by giving all students free university and college education, or is there another plan?
Well, I think they need to be able to learn the skills that businesses need in order to find employment in those sectors.
Okay. Anybody else like to comment on that? Candidate Alghabra.
Thank you for the question, David. And let me again set the context to this question. The fact of the matter is our economy is doing well, and our unemployment is at lowest level in Canada's history. And that is why we are having these challenges. So those are challenges, a byproduct of our growing economy and prosperous society. And you're right. As I traveled around the country, as I speak to businesses here in Mississauga, that is usually the number one question that many businesses are facing. How do we find the skills that we're looking for? So we have been responding to these needs, and some of the measures that we have already implemented is creating this. First, we increase our investment in working with post-secondary institutions, particularly colleges, community colleges that offer apprenticeship programs and retraining programs. Second, we've implemented something called the training benefit that many workers can take advantage of, up to $2,000, where they can get financial support so they can get retrained. And that also is working with colleges and businesses. Third, we worked as well with businesses on making sure that they attract the brightest from around the world as we continue to struggle to find skilled labor here in Canada. And there's a global strategy program that has enabled businesses to recruit some of the brightest and the smartest people from around the world that fit a skill that they couldn't find here in Canada, and has been able to provide them with those visas within 2 weeks. So there's a variety of measures that we've been working on, and certainly the answer is ensuring that there's retraining programs available for our workers, and ensuring that our immigration levels track the highest quality of workers for our businesses.
Candidate Alzaba.
I know the question was about job retention and ensuring that the credentials of employees don't run stale and that they're constantly upgraded. And Candidate Alghabra was mentioning about the success of all the job creations. Now, realistically, if you look at the deficit, the job creations were run on credit. It's like paying someone with your credit card until you max out your credit card, you can no longer pay the interest, and then you'll start to see a lot of layoffs. So yes, the job growth looks nice. It's top-heavy as well. 70% of the job creations were done at the government, in the government public sector, not in corporations. And now going back to the question at hand was, how do we retain talent? How do we ensure that employees, their credentials are upgraded so that they can move around within the free trade market, within corporations, and find jobs easily? The answer to that is really giving trust in our civil society, trusting the private sector, working with them and creating learning and development programs. I work in a corporation right now that has a learning and development center, and they are reaping in a lot of revenue just because they take care of their employees. We have incentives in Quebec. Quebec province has incentives for corporations who train their employees. They reward these corporations, and this is what we need to be looking at. Now, to be honest, I'm being completely transparent. The People's Party of Canada does not have any specific policy to that, but this is something that I am personally passionate about and that I will fight for locally, provincially, and at the federal level.
Candidate Ambler.
Candidate Alghabra mentioned a couple of things that I just wanted to address. One I don't agree with, and one that I do. He mentioned the Canada training credit, but unfortunately, that's no one's actually benefited from that yet. It's not targeted. It's poorly designed. The CFIB has said that it's poorly linked to the needs of employers. So essentially, it doesn't work, mainly because of the standards. The standards aren't relevant. So in the CFIB report, they specifically mention that it would allow Latin or interpretive dance studies to be included. I mean, so it just, it's not working. I do agree, though, with you, Omar, that it does skills training and having the skills that businesses need. It's actually essential that we that immigration is where we get, we obviously get a lot of people who come to Canada. We want them to have the skills that our businesses need and that our economy needs. So we will expand the Red Seal program, which recognizes common credentials, and work to harmonize the training criteria and requirements. But we'll do a few things differently, like restructuring the Express Entry program so that we continue to attract the best and the brightest. But we want to reverse Justin Trudeau's decision to reduce the number of points awarded for a job offer, because that's actually happened in the last 4 years. And I mean, I'm of the view that, if you're an immigrant coming to Canada and you have a job offer, that's very valuable, and that should be worth a high number of points.
Okay, final comment, 1 minute to Candidate Hill.
So I think many of us candidates today received a broadcast email from the president of the Canadian Construction Association pointing out that they employ about 1.4 million workers in this country, and they're facing a real shortage in terms of skilled technical trades right now. And as the climate change crisis takes hold and creates significant shifts in our business communities and our work sector here, I think we'll find a ready opportunity to retrain workers from the oil and gas sector into the construction trades. So again, I think we need to be aware of these shifts here and be prepared to deal with them and be able to make sure that we remove financial barriers for those people to get the retraining that they want.
Candidate Hill, back to you. You talked about free tuition for post-secondary education. And as a parent who has just paid for 2 children to go through university, it's a little late for me, and I was fortunate, and my children were fortunate enough that we were able to pay for that tuition. My question is, free tuition is an admirable recommendation. How are we paying for that?
Well, a lot of universities seem to be caught in this spiral of fundraising to provide education of different quality here. There have been a lot of funding cuts since the 1990s to universities, so universities have had to come to rely now on more part-time contract instructors and higher tuition fees and fundraising in order to produce the books. We'll reinvest in that system and allocate $10 billion to post-secondary and trade school supports. So we fund it by redirecting existing spending on bursaries, canceling tuition tax credits, and saving the cost of administering the student loan system, and redirecting the hundreds of millions of dollars of student loan defaults written off every year.
And do you have a price tag for this program?
About $10 billion.
Sorry?
About $10 billion.
$10 billion?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else care to candidate Alsaba?
While really admirable and really a great idea, definitely a dream idea to have education free in post-secondary education free, it just doesn't seem realistic with, again, it goes back to where are we going to get the money? $10 billion. We're already in a deficit. It goes back to where we're going to get the money to pay this. Are we going to go back to our credit and run another credit and watch another service collapse in 10 to 15 years, or maybe even sooner? The truth is that students are responsible. Post-secondary students are not objecting to paying tuition fee. What they're objecting to, and we've seen that last year in a student petition, is the high interest, ridiculous interest rate. I'm still paying my OSAP. It is up to 6.1%, and it started off 10 years ago at 5%. So it's creeping up. It's prime plus 6.1% right now, and this is what students are arguing. Why are we paying interest? Why are we, as post-secondary students, why is the government profiting off our backs through our student loans and giving subsidies to multi-billion-dollar corporations? That is the question. And so with regards to education, it's not about free education, and nothing is ever free. That word is so overused. It's about having a fair tuition loan program, and it starts with interest.
Any other candidates? Candidate Alghabra and then candidate Ambler.
Thanks, David. Look, education is the greatest equalizer in our society. And it is really important that people do not or are not denied access to education because of their socioeconomic status. It's important that they should not be rejected education because their parents don't make enough. So, and it's regrettable, we're seeing the impact of the Doug Ford government cuts last year on how many students have been dramatically, personally impacted with these cuts. They're unable to access courses that they needed to graduate or unable to pick the program that they choose. So our government has introduced a grants program for students, and we're announcing that we're going to increase those grants up to $4,000 a year for students who it will be means tested, for students who need it, to make sure that they have access to the education that, as I said, it equalizes us in society. It produces productive citizens, our society. They're going to be taxpayers. They're going to build our country. So we need to make sure that any Canadian who wants to access education and have the credentials and the marks to get there, that they have access to it. And we're also providing relief for loans, so students don't have to pay it back for 2 years or until they earn $35,000 a year. Plus, if they're starting a family, they can also have a reprieve or a pause until they focus on raising their family.
Candidate Ambler.
We want to set students up for success, keep talent in Canada after university. So we'll work with universities and colleges to make the curricula fit the demands of the labor market as it is, month to month, year to year. With regard to international students, they're often ideal candidates to fill the gaps in the Canadian job market. And so our plan is to match those students and their skills with the jobs that are in high demand. We will also, Andrew Scheer and the Conservatives are going to raise the matching component of the RESP, which from 20 to 30%, maxing out at $2,500 a year. I know that, David, that helped my husband and I send our 2 children to university as well. We started investing when they were, it was actually brand new when my daughter, who's now 24, was born. So that's what I call really investing in kids' futures. I think that, sending people camping is not really an investment in the future, especially if you're spending $500 million to do it.
Candidate Alzabat, did you want to, did you have a response?
Yeah, I
Yes.
just had a comment about what candidate El Ghabra said about giving more grants to students. Now, the risk with federal governments continuously pumping more grants, more money into and meddling with provincial jurisdiction is that it absolves the provincial government from any responsibility. Doug Ford's probably looking at this and going, good, let's hope the federal government gives out more money because then we could cut more services. And this is where it becomes an ego clash. We can't afford to give more grants at the federal level and risk having a provincial government wipe their hands clean from anything to do with post-secondary education. Like I said, it goes back to interest levels. Students are not, they don't have an issue with paying their tuition, as we've seen in that petition in 2018. Their issue is why are rich corporations getting free money and they have to pay interest and have governments profit over their backs.
Candidate El Ghabra.
Look, I have a lot of respect for Hazar, and I appreciate her passion, but I want to just take a moment to expose something here. Just a minute ago, she said corporations that have retentions programs should be given tax credits from government.
I
But
said
now-
incentives, not tax credits.
Oh, sorry, incentives, which is also still the same, it's taxpayers' money.
Not
But now, when we're talking about students, oh, no, we can't do that, this is provincial jurisdiction. All I'm saying is that parties make choices, parties makes decisions on policies that they feel are important to looking after their citizens, to look after Canadians. And of course, it's healthy that we have differences of opinion. Of course, it's healthy that we have a different way of believing what the role of government should be. But let's not be, hypocritical here. We know that people have selective ideas that they want to implement, and they see a role for government, and they don't like other ideas, and that's fine. But we're not consistent.
There's no hypocrisy here. I said incentives through learning and development programs in corporations, and then talked about students not wanting, and the risk of students being, having the provinces absolve their responsibilities for their students in their post-secondary education. No hypocrisy there. I didn't mention tax breaks to corporations. I just said that we should work with corporations and trust the private sector in helping by having them, encouraging them in building learning and development programs to help their workers increase their credentials and upgrade their credentials so that they don't have to worry if there's ever a layoff, because this is where we're going with your deficit.
Well, I'm glad everybody has a different opinion. Otherwise, how would we ever choose who to vote for if everybody was homogenous and looked all the same?